What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, yesterday, a big-time game shadow dropped out of nowhere. Well, sort of. I mean, when it's early access, but still, people were very excited to get their hands on Hades 2. And in fact, I got a chance to play some of it on my Steam Deck OLED, so I'll go over some of my experiences with that game here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a code name for a mystery Switch or even Switch 2 game that leaked out online. That's, of course, having everyone guess as to exactly what it is. And then we'll also be taking a look at some of the Helldivers 2 fallout with Sony backtracking. Well, gamers are basically celebrating online, and in fact, that's starting to show up in the reviews on Steam. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members of the channel do get Newswave early and ad-free. If you'd like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're going to start today with Nintendo's financial report that actually should have released late last night. We'll be doing some coverage on that in the next Newswave here coming up tomorrow. But I do want to give a quick snapshot before the update happens technically, which you can see that here, with the big one people are going to be honing in on being the Switch, just under that 140 million mark. I expect with the update it to be pushed up over this by a couple million, I guess. And we are expecting the Switch to have slowed down some, just like globally. We see it in Japan week to week how well it's doing, but just in general across like worldwide sales to have at least dipped down some. It tends to happen when you get 7 or 8 years into a console's life, but still it is technically on the path to passing up the PS2 and eventually the DS. However, the big thing people are trying to figure out outside of the hardware numbers would be if Nintendo will say anything to investors about their plans for the current fiscal year that we find ourselves in. Remember, that started right at the beginning of April, so we're more than a month in. People are wondering if Nintendo will drop any information to investors for an outlook for the next 11 months or so, since, well, if we think the next system is releasing by March of 2025, they'll at least have to start saying something about their forecast, but we'll see if Nintendo says anything other than, yes, we're always working on future hardware. Also, while Helldivers 2 did have its PlayStation Network login requirement revoked, we do have another game coming up from Sony here pretty soon, in about a week or so, with Tsushima, that will require a PlayStation login, specifically for the multiplayer, which you can see this is posted up by Sucker Punch because they were even brought into the whole Helldivers 2 discourse over on X, where they say, just so you're aware, a PSN account is required for Legends online multiplayer mode and to use PlayStation Overlay. Remember, in that game, there's an overlay you can do with like a hotkey combination so you can get like trophy data, that sort of thing. They do say it is not required to play the single player game. Now, people are trying to figure out okay, what's the difference here between that and Helldivers 2? The biggest thing with Helldivers 2 is they added it months after release, the requirement. If they showed up day one, it probably wouldn't have gotten to the point that it did here, whereas with Ghost of Tsushima with Legends, they're showing up day one with that login requirement. So that's the big differentiating factor. And of course, there's a full single player you can just play and experience without the need for a PlayStation account. For the multiplayer with crossplay, that's sort of how they're kind of pushing that, but I do believe that PlayStation Network login will be more and more important for Sony going forward with their big PC push. Oh, and here's a record that was broken that I didn't even know was technically a record. People have been keeping the 3DS and the Wii U online alive, actually. In fact, we can see this is over on X. This is from Gaps, who says, everyone on this list has stayed online on Nintendo Network for longer after it shut down than a patch did after the original Xbox Live shutdown on Halo 2. So, I mean, technically people are just staying online for these games, and that's basically keeping the session open. If you remember on Halo 2, people were actually keeping that alive on the original Xbox by just staying in a room. And in that instance, they had a little over 25 days, which has technically been crossed since the Nintendo Network shut down April 8th, and then you have that list of people here who are keeping Mario Maker, Splatoon, Xenoblade Chronicles X, Mario Kart 7, and X and Y alive now. So again, a record I didn't know was a thing, but congratulations, I guess, for breaking it. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Hades 2, which had a surprise release. Now, there's been testing for Hades 2 here and there, but it hasn't been like a wide scale of early access until now. In fact, yesterday I just saw this pop up in the early day, and I said, wow, that Hades 2 is just out now, and again, early access, so at this time, it's on PC through Steam, and I mean, you can see the Steam page here for it. It's currently sitting overwhelmingly positive with over 3,000 reviews, this all being done in less than 24 hours, and people are getting a kick out of this game. It's currently priced at $29.99. Again, though, remember, this is early access, so it's going to be changing depending on community feedback, but we have had some, I mean, I'd say successful stories for games that have hit early access for a prolonged period of time and then just ended up releasing in its full 1.0 version where people are just thrilled with the product. I'm thinking of like Baldur's Gate 3 as a great example. But in this case, they do go over all the different questions and bullet points for this release, even covering why early access, saying we designed the original early access for Hades from the ground up. And the same is true for Hades 2, our first ever sequel. We believe everything about this game benefits from ongoing feedback, from the balancing to the storytelling. Now, there is a question about how long this game will be in early access, because as soon as it leaves early access, you're probably going to see a full-scale release on Nintendo's platform, Sony, Microsoft, everywhere really at that time, because it's done so well across all these different platforms for the original Hades. They say at least through the end of 2024, but because this is early access, just given the nature of it, it can obviously change just as the game most likely will. And I will say, it does appear that there's quite a bit of content here. In fact, they say technically, there's more content here than Hades, just from the start with Hades 2, as they have been developing this for multiple years now, and they did also mention that pricing could change as they get closer to that 1.0 release, just based on the amount of content they end up packing in when it's all said and done. Now, I did enjoy the original Hades. I think I played it for like 30 or 40 hours, and I know there are people out there who've played it for hundreds of hours, but I think that was enough for me, and I had a really good time with it. But I did pick this up for the $30 on the Steam Deck OLED. I thought it'd be interesting just to see how it would run there, as like Hades has no issue, then I assume Hades 2 wouldn't either. And in fact, with the Steam Deck OLED, it's just running at 90 frames per second, which with the OLED model, it does go up to 90 hertz, so you get that full experience. And the OLED screen looks awesome for this game. Now, if you play that and then now Hades 2, you know, there's a lot of darker areas, but then also some very bright parts to those darker areas with like a lot of light beams and stuff hitting, and it just really pops on that Steam Deck OLED. So if you do have one, I completely recommend this game. Otherwise, so far from what I've played, it's still Hades. I mean, it's not a bad thing or anything, and it does appear that they are trying to build up more content in terms of kind of like your home base area and the different weapons and abilities you have, but certainly playing off of really the groundwork that they built with the first Hades. But again, things can change as they go forward here with early access. I completely expect it to, since they will be taking feedback consistently from the community. But if you've been curious about Hades 2, it's $29.99, and there is quite a bit of content there, a bit different than what you'd expect from buying into the majority of early access games. Otherwise, you're probably looking at 2025 for it's come to other systems, but I mean, if you're fine waiting, you're probably just going to get a really, really good release at that 1.0 mark, just based on them being able to change and alter in early access here. Who knows? Maybe they can set it up as a game that's there in that launch window for Nintendo's next system and probably sell a ton of copies there. But yeah, I think Hades 2 is going to be in good shape by the time it's done here, just based on how it is currently with an early access release. Next up, let's talk about a mystery Nintendo game that was just leaked online from Midori, who is a very reliable source, but the only thing that's odd about this one is they're typically involved with a lot of Sega and Atlas news, so I'll admit it did catch me off guard when I saw this posted up, where they say a game is in development at Nintendo with the codename Banquet. They have shared, Midori has shared like information about the Switch 2, maybe for example, a time that it could release in like March 2025, but that could also be because Sega and Atlas, let's be real, probably are developing right now with some sort of release window in mind for Nintendo's next system with their own dev kits and stuff, so it makes sense how they would get info there. That's why this one caught me off guard though, because this is just Nintendo, and they're developing a game with codename Banquet. The best part, of course, is that people are looking at that codename, trying to figure out what it means. The only issue with that is codenames are designed to not necessarily be related completely to the end product. So the design is we can use this codename to more or less discuss the title without saying what the title is. So if you just go and look at some of the other code names Nintendo's used for different games, you can put the systems aside, like the Switch was the NX or something. Splatoon 3 was Thunder, Kid Icarus Uprising was Apollo, and Animal Crossing New Horizons was Park, which, I mean, that kind of lines up. Breakfast is Kirby Dream Buffet. That also kind of lines up. Kirby Star Allies was Eclair. Super Mario Party was Buffet, which that might be the closest to Banquet. So maybe you want to look at this and say, oh, it's a new Super Mario Party. But my only thing with that is, if Midori is putting this out there, it does make me think that there's some sort of tie between Sega and Nintendo on this project. Maybe it is a collaboration between the two. They've collaborated a bunch in the past on different games, even just outside of like Mario and Sonic Olympic games. I'm just trying to figure out where that connection is exactly for Midori to have this kind of information, but it's just a fun mystery and something we can look back on when the game does eventually come out, because we get a lot of these code names through data mining anyway, so most likely it'll come out. Oatmeal Dome or somebody will look through the files, find that code name, and we'll know at that time what exactly Banquet was. But hey, let me know down in the comments what your best guess is for what Nintendo is developing here. Next up, let's talk about Helldivers 2 and Sony. As we know, late at night, Sony decided to reverse course on the decision to have that mandatory PlayStation Network login if you were just going to play Helldivers 2, even if you had purchased it in a region that does not support PSN. And then they just started delisting the game. It was a whole situation. But now that they've reversed course, it also looks like a lot of people are reversing course on their reviews. Like, you could take a look just here at, we were going over how the red bars just kept growing and growing over time with a lot of the backlash, and now it looks like a ton of positive reviews are coming in to where it's like over 40 or 50,000 or so reviews that came in the following day after that Sony announcement, which, I mean, it's kind of funny looking at the graph. You can tell where that announcement was made clearly, but also it does, I'm sure, make people look at that and go, okay, wow, review bombing does work. I mean, in this case, I'd say just the backlash and the pressure on Arrowhead that also spilled over to Sony. I mean, that's clearly the reason that Sony decided to about face on this one. I don't think they're done, though, with PlayStation Network on PC. It's just they got to be smarter about how they go about getting people onto a PlayStation Network account. It's not that people on PC wouldn't sign up for it, so they don't want to be forced to. So if you can entice them through different benefits outside of just playing the game, like whether it's cosmetics as an example, you could disable or enable crossplay depending on if they have a PlayStation Network, if they're really concerned about like security stuff. There are ways they can get people to sign up without just putting a barrier in front of them, and maybe that's something they'll take away from this whole thing, because they did mention, hey, we're trying to figure out this whole PC space, since yeah, they are technically new to it in that regard, and I think it's something they'll continue to explore going forward, because with how expensive their games are getting to make, they do have to continue kind of widening their audience, and really one of the best ways to do that now for them, outside of trying to put stuff on Nintendo's system, which should have a massive install size even going into next generation, now you go to PC. So we'll see if they continue to figure out different ways to get people on PSN without just annoying the entire community. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about an awesome modification that is currently ongoing, this project for Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which you probably didn't see that one coming. But if you remember, when Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite came out, that was what, in 2017? Well, it didn't go over so well. Specifically the build-up when we found out there were no X-Men characters in the game, which, if you're at all familiar with any of the older Marvel vs. Capcom games, there are many characters from the X-Men universe that are staples for people like in the franchise. And then on top of that, the game just doesn't look very good. And the art style specifically does not look good. It just doesn't really match up with what we've had in the past, especially if you look at Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I think it looks significantly better. And in fact, based on some of the screenshots and videos that are now going around from, like, for example, you can see this is from Rin, and there are a number of them that I'll link to down in the sources. It just looks significantly better. It's more cel-shaded, right? Which again matches closer to what we have with MVC3. And while I'm not a big Marvel vs. Capcom person, I mean, even I could see Infinite and go, wow, that is a major eyesore of a game. But the work here is extensive. Like, there's some serious talent in some of these modifications to the game. And what gets really interesting is Maximilian Dude has sort of come in here and is even working to fund some of this project, and it seems like they're taking feedback from the community over on his channel where he's making videos and taking in comments, and this is really, really impressive stuff. Now, if you're interested at all in this, again, I'll leave links down below to some of these screenshots and videos that are being posted up by Rin over on X. But to go a bit further, this is something that's being applied obviously to PC, and right now Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is like $12 on sale on Humble Bundle. I looked over on Steam, the game's like $40 still, which I'll admit caught me a bit off guard on that one, that it's still at like $40 on Steam, but still $12 over on Humble Bundle, and it seems to activate on Steam. I mean, that's a pretty good pickup, especially if you're someone who grabbed the game and went, wow, this just is not very good, and then just went back to MVC3. At least in this case, they're trying to fix some of the major issues when it comes to the visuals and stuff. And again, if you want to kind of follow along here with some of the developments, make sure you follow Rin over on X, or I guess check out Maximilian Dude, as he's kind of continued to follow this himself on his own channel. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, are you picking up Hades 2? Okay, let's see. 15% say getting it ASAP. Again, this is early access, so technically the game's not even 1.0 yet. 36% say yes, but later when it releases on more platforms. Then 49% say no, I'm not interested. Okay, so 51% are at least interested enough to look into it, maybe get it, even when it goes to other platforms and releases in 1.0. I still understand that there is going to be some hesitancy over any early access title, and really there should be. Like, I know it's Hades, so you look at that and go, okay, clearly they understand how to make this game, and it's already been in development for multiple years before they went to early access, and the early access version is actually pretty packed with content as it is. But the idea of early access is technically the project go away tomorrow, and you have to understand that. But still, I think so far, from about 2 hours I've played of it now, it looks like it's still that same level of quality that we had with Hades, and I'm excited to continue diving into it, and I am interested to see how much it'll change, really in real time then, as I kind of play through the game, probably throughout the year as I do different runs and try to get a bit stronger and progress the story a bit more. But let me know if you picked up Hades 2 and what your thoughts are on it so far. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Kipters. You know, I'll pick these comments and I won't even look at the name to read it out loud until I'm here. But okay, sure. Kipters will say, we're still learning what is best for PC players. More like we're still learning what we can get away with. Okay, yeah, yes, basically, sure. There's PR speak for a reason, is to say we wanted to see what we could do. Okay, now we know. And technically we're still learning, so let's spin that and make it sound like we were just trying to see how things were in the PC community without saying, we wanted you to sign up, we tried to push it as far as we could. Okay, that didn't work. Let's backtrack and now make it optional, and maybe we'll come up with ways to entice you to go and click the register button. But yeah, bigger corporations, publishers, they will push as far as they can until they get some sort of pushback. And in this case, I think it's more than Sony was expecting. Arrowhead at least knew there'd be backlash, and I almost wonder if even they were caught off guard by this one. But hey, technically, PC gamers got it done and made Sony really just reverse their course completely. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Where's Hades 2 releasing into early access out of nowhere? Were you really excited when that announcement came through online? And how much of it have you had a chance to play? And then also, what about Codename Banquet? What do you think Nintendo is developing? And is it for the current Switch, or is it for their next generation system? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.